Hi, I'm going to be reading one of my favorite fairy tales of all time called The Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen, although there is a version by the Grimm's brothers that we will go into if you chose this fairy tale for our fairy tale flip. A deep dive into the hidden meanings. And I'm wearing my Aran sweatshirt that I got from, I think it's very appropriate because it's from the islands that are the furthest into the Atlantic from Ireland. And this tale has something to do with that. All right, so you ready? Sit back and just enjoy. Far, far away, where the swallows fly when we have winter, there lived a king who had 11 sons and one daughter, Elisa. The 11 brothers, princes all, each went to school with a star at his breast and a sword at his side. They wrote with pencils of diamond upon golden slates, and could say their lessons by heart just as easily as they could read it from the book. You could tell at a glance how princely they were. Their sister Elisa sat on a little footstool of flawless glass. She had a picture book that had cost half a kingdom. Oh, the children had a very fine time, but it did not last forever. Their father, who was king over the whole country, married a wicked queen who did not treat his poor children at all well. At parties, their new stepmother gave them only sand in a teacup and told them to make believe that it was tea. The queen sent little Elisa to live in the country with some peasants and turned the princes into swans. Fly out into the world and make your own living, the wicked queen told them. Fly away like big birds without a voice. And they turned into 11 magnificent white swans, flew out of the palace window and into the woods. Elisa was to go back home when she became 15, but as soon as the queen saw what a beautiful princess she was, she felt spiteful and full of hatred towards her. She would not have hesitated to turn her into a wild swan like her brothers, but she did not dare to just yet because the king wanted to see his daughter. The evil queen rubbed Elisa with walnut stain that turned her skin dark brown, smeared her beautiful face with a vile ointment, and tousled her lovely hair. No one could have recognized the beautiful Elisa, and when her father saw her, he was shocked. He said that this could not be his daughter. Poor Elisa cried and thought of her 11 brothers. Heavy-hearted, she stole away from the palace and wandered all day long over fields and marshes till she came to the vast forest. She had no idea where to turn. All she felt was her sorrow and her longing to be with her brothers. Like herself, they must have been driven out into the world, and she set her heart upon finding them. She'd been in the forest only a little while when night came on, and as she had strayed very far from any sign of a path, she lay down on the soft moss with her head pillowed against a stump. She dreamed of her brothers all night long. When she woke, the sun was already high. She wandered deeper into the woods, not knowing whither she went. She thought of her brothers. She had never known such solitude. The night came on, pitch black. A few steps further on, she met an old woman who had a basket of berries and gave some of them to her. Elisa asked her if she had seen 11 princes riding through the forest. No, the old woman said, but yesterday I saw 11 swans who wore golden crowns. They were swimming in the river not far from here. So Elisa went to the river, and among the wet seaweed she found 11 white swan feathers, which she collected in a sheaf just at sunset. She saw 11 white swans with golden crowns on their heads fly toward the shore. She climbed up and hid behind a bush on the steep bank. The swans came down near her and flapped their magnificent white wings. As soon as the sun went down beyond the sea, the swans threw off their feathers, and there stood 11 handsome princes. They were her brothers, and although they were greatly altered, she knew in her heart that she could not be mistaken. She cried aloud and rushed into their arms, calling them each by name. The princes were so happy to see their little sister. They laughed and they cried. "We brothers," said the eldest, "are forced to fly about disguised as wild swans as long as the sun in the heavens. But when it goes down, we take back our human form. So at sunset, we must always look about us for some firm foothold, because if ever we were flying among the clouds at sunset, we would be dashed down to the earth. We are allowed to come back to our native land only once a year, and we do not dare to stay longer than 11 days. As we fly over this forest, we can see the palace where our father lives and where we were born." "How shall I set you free?" their sister asked, and they talked on for most of the night, sparing only a few hours for sleep. In the morning, Elisa was awakened by the rustling of swans' wings overhead. Her brothers, once more enchanted, wheeled above her in great circles until they were out of sight. One of them, her youngest brother, stayed with her and rested his head on her breast while she stroked his wings. They spent the whole day together, and toward evening the others returned. As soon as the sun went down, they resumed their own shape. "Tomorrow," said one of her brothers, "we must fly away, and we dare not return until a whole year has passed. But we cannot leave you here like this. Have you courage enough to come with us? My arm is strong enough to carry you through the forest, so surely the wings of all of us should be strong enough to bear you across the sea." "Yes, take me with you," said Elisa. All day they flew like arrows, whipping through the air. Yet because they had their sister to carry, they flew more slowly than on their former journeys. "I only wish I could dream how to set you free," she thought. In her dreams, a fairy who came out to meet her was fair and shining, yet she closely resembled the old woman who gave her the berries in the forest and told her of the swans who wore golden crowns on their head. "Your brothers can be set free," she said, "but you have to have the courage and tenacity to do it. The sea water that changes the shape of rough stones is indeed softer than your delicate hands, but it cannot feel the pain that your fingers will feel. It has no heart, so it cannot suffer the anguish and heartache that you will have to endure. Do you see this stinging nettle in my hand? Many such nettles grow around the cave where you sleep. Only those and the ones that grow upon graves in the churchyards may be used. Remember that. Those you must gather, although they will burn your hands to blisters. Crush the nettles with your feet, and you will have flax, which you must spin and weave into 11 shirts of mail with long sleeves. Once you throw these over the 11 wild swans, the spell over them is broken. But keep this well in mind. From the moment you undertake this task until it is done, even though it lasts for years, you must not speak. The first word you say will strike your brothers' hearts like deadly knives. Their lives are at the mercy of your tongue. Now remember what I told you." She touched Elisa's hand with nettles that burned like fire and awakened her, because remember, she was dreaming. It was broad daylight, and close at hand, where she had been sleeping, grew a nettle like those of which she had dreamed. She left the cave to begin her task. With her soft hands, she took hold of the dreadful nettles that seared like fire. Great blisters rose on her hands and arms, but she endured it gladly in the hope that she could free her beloved brothers. She crushed each nettle with her bare feet and spun the green flax. When her brothers returned at sunset, it alarmed them that she did not speak. They feared that this was some new spell cast by their wicked stepmother. But when they saw her hands, they understood that she labored to save them. The youngest wept, and wherever his tears touched Elisa, she felt no more pain, and the burning blisters healed. She toiled throughout the night, for she could not rest until she had delivered her beloved brothers from the enchantment. Throughout the day, while the swans were gone, she sat all alone, but never had the time sped so quickly. One shirt was made, and she set to work on the second one. But a hunter came to the forest. It was the king, and he found her so lovely that he insisted she come to his castle with him. Elisa shook her head, for she did not dare speak. Her brother's deliverance and their very lives depended on it, and she hid her hands under her apron to keep the king from seeing how much she suffered. "Come with me," he told her. "You cannot stay here. If you are as good as you are fair, I shall clothe you in silk and velvet, set a golden crown upon your head, and give you my finest palace to live in." Then he lifted her up on his horse. When she wept and wrung her hands, the king told her, "My only wish is to make you happy. Someday you will thank me for doing this." Off through the mountains he spurred, holding her before him on his horse as his huntsman galloped behind him. The king chose her for his bride, although the archbishop shook his head and whispered that this lovely maid of the woods must be a witch who had blinded their eyes and stolen the king's heart because she could not speak. But the king would not listen to him. He had beautiful clothes made for her and welcomed her into the palace. Then he brought her into a little chamber adjoining her bedroom. It was covered with splendid green embroideries and looked just like the cave in which he had found her. On the floor lay the bundle of flax she had spun from the nettles, and from the ceiling hung the shirt she had already finished. One of the huntsmen had brought these with him as curiosities. "Here, you may dream that you are back in your old home," the king told her. "Here is the work that you were doing there, and surrounded by all your splendor, it may amuse you to think of those times." When Elisa saw these things, she kissed the king's hand, and the king took that as acceptance to his proposal. The beautiful mute girl from the forest was to be the country's queen. The archbishop whispered evil words in the king's ear, but they did not reach his heart. The wedding was to take place. The archbishop himself was to place the crown on her head. Every day, Elisa grew fonder and fonder of the king. Oh, if only she could confide in him and tell him what grieved her. But mute she must remain and finish her task in silence. So at night she would steal away from his side into her little chamber, which resembled the cave, and there she wove one shirt after another. But when she set to work on the seventh, there was not enough flax to finish it. She knew that the nettles she must use grew in the churchyard, but she had to gather them herself. How could she go there? Only one man saw her in the churchyard picking nettles, the archbishop. He was awake while others slept. Now he had proof of what he suspected. There was something wrong with the queen. She was a witch, and that was how she had duped the king and all his people. In the confessional, he told the king what he had seen and what he feared. Meanwhile, Elisa had almost finished her task. Only one shirt was lacking. But again, she ran out of flax. Not a single nettle was left. Once more, for the last time, she must go to the churchyard and pluck a few more handfuls. The king and the archbishop saw her there, and there was no way the king could deny that his new bride was odd. "Let the people judge her," the archbishop said. And the people did judge her. They condemned her to die by fire. She was led from her splendid royal halls to a dungeon, dark and damp, where the wind whistled in between the window bars. Instead of silks and velvets, they gave her for a pillow the bundle of nettles she had gathered, and for her coverlet the harsh, burning shirts of mail she had woven. But they could not have given her anything that pleased her more. She set to work again. It was still in the early dawn, an hour before sunrise, when the 11 brothers reached the palace gates and demanded to see the king. This, they were told, was not possible. It was still night. The king was asleep and could not be disturbed. They begged and threatened so loudly that the guard turned out, and even the king came running to find out what the trouble was. But at that instant, the sun rose and the 11 brothers vanished. 11 swans were seen flying above the palace. All of the townsmen were flocking out through the town gates, for they wanted to see the witch burned. A decrepit old horse pulled the cart in which Elisa sat. They had dressed her to coarse sackcloth, and all her lovely long hair hung loose around her beautiful head. Her cheeks were deathly pale, and her lips moved in silent prayer as her fingers twisted the green flax. Even on her way to death, she did not stop until her work was finished. 10 shirts lay at her feet, and she worked away on the 7th. And she worked her way on the 11th. The 11 white swans fled. The 11 white swans flew down and made a ring around the cart with their flapping wings. As the executioner seized her arm, she made haste to throw the 11 shirts over the swans, who instantly became 11 handsome princes. But the youngest brother still had a swan's wing in place of one arm, where a sleeve was missing from his shirt. Elisa had not been able to finish it. "Now," she cried, "I may speak. I am innocent." "She is innocent indeed," said her eldest brother, and he told them all what had happened. All the church bells began to ring on their own accord, and the air was filled with birds. Back to the palace went a bridal procession such as no king has ever enjoyed before more. That's the Wild Swans. It's an abbreviated version of it. I encourage you to read the entire fairy tale. And there are also modern trilogies about it. I will put those in the show notes, and let us know if this is the one you want us to look into. So interesting and so beautiful. Thanks for listening. For more fairy tale flip insights like this one, please press like and subscribe.